70s, you know?
Yeah. It benefits everybody, you know, and that's,
Yeah.
like I told Mark, I said, you know, it's not so much a historic issue as it is the characteristics issue. You want to keep the characteristics of Georgetown.
Yeah.
That's where I think it kind of gets lost in translation too.
Yeah.
Hello,
Hey, Michael.
I'm here.
Hey, thank you.
Oh, thank you too.
Be right with you.
Okay,
Just getting stuff ready to go.
So when we do the joint work session, that's because Rick had said it's not really a public hearing.
Right, the audience can't comment, they're not supposed to, but they can attend it.
But we could ask them to further comments.
Well, that would be up to you, I guess.
Yeah, which is fine, right? I mean, I definitely would rather do that
I mean,
if possible.
yeah,
Just only because as touchy as the situation is,
yeah,
I don't know if I'm sitting over there giving us evil looks with something to say that then nothing gets said, then we have to have another
Yeah.
meeting because it got left out.
that's good.
So, it's I'd rather just people say how they feel and then we could comment right then
Okay,
instead of waiting.
good.
Oh, I hope that's okay. Which is kind of, because it's also too, it's kind of off of that same small meeting that we already had. And so the input, at least they can keep it fresh on what they had said there.
Mhm.
You need a hand?
No, I got it. Oh my
Oh,
Okay. Oh, yeah. Very good. I just decided this was easier than Zoom. Okay,
I like real faces sitting here.
yeah. Well, I don't say a whole lot, but on Zoom it's hard to do anything.
But sometimes personally being here, to me, it's worth more
My
than
husband gives me.
you guys, when you go up Vanilla Pass, are you guys on the right side right there? Okay, gotcha. I run that road. This time of year, I run it 3 or 4 times a week. And I'm always like, I wonder which house is yours.
We see people run up, I didn't know that was you. You
Oh,
said
yeah.
it's ladies walking.
Yeah, that would be Robin. I see Robin walking all the time. No, exactly. My wife, if you see a woman with a border collie, that's my wife. I think it's a few other people.
You know if she's walking, getting around? Jen, do you know if Robin's getting around at all?
I don't think she started walking yet. 'Cause I thought I heard.
My mind just died. Zach and Robin, what's her last name? Robin, my mind just died.
Yeah,
Never mind.
I don't know if I know them.
She owns Buckskin
Oh, right, yeah.
her husband Zach's code enforcement with Idaho Springs.
and then what she did to her, with to her leg, you know. I know she's got a boot, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, and I knew she wasn't walking too.
I know you have a pen in here somewhere. Works for you, does that help?
I haven't been.
I found it, thanks. I try to be organized, but you never know.
I guess I guess Mary's daughter's all right then?
I mean,
What would you-
they're coming home on Saturday.
Gotcha. I had, I
I'll
forgot.
tell you about that later, I'm not gonna say it over dinner.
Are we on the list?
Yeah, no problem.
Sorry, I forgot about that. I felt bad because I was gonna shoot her a message last night and I got so sidetracked and
Yeah.
we don't really do the Valentine's Day stuff. But then I was mad at McKenna because she got me a box of candy, hard candies. She's from Denmark. They don't do Valentine's Day in Denmark, but now they didn't, but now they kind of do. And so it's just like, I kind of annoying me. So I was sidetracked with that, but
And do you have a copy of this? They're gonna probably talk, well, yeah,
No, I do not.
they're talking about this.
That's in my packet, isn't it?
Not in the one that I emailed. Oh, good. Okay, yeah.
is this,
I thought it was a different map, that's why I said no, but yes, I've got it.
you had a question, is this the one that Bob gave us from the small meeting that we had?
Brent updated this and,
So it's the most recent update?
yeah, it's.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
You have an extra, because.
yeah. I
If
have
Marvin
it.
Gray comes, well, give.
Yeah, that's what I thought, everything's right
Yeah,
here.
Mark was asking about that.
Yeah, everything's, we have extras.
That's a tremendous amount of work for that I think is awesome. I wish I could do the whole town.
Yeah.
I'm on there.
That was neat to see. Yeah, so you get your place on there. It's cool.
So Gary asked me if he was on the map today, and I said no, but I was looking too far down Second Street.
Yeah, you guys are right
We're
on.
the only
So
house,
that's,
we're in the middle of that switchback, we're the only house there.
that's what I was saying. Yeah, like, that's crazy. That makes sense now, because when you talked about them doing a retainer wall and stuff, that was literally in your backyard.
Oh, yeah.
That had to be,
I fought that thing tooth and nail,
yeah.
but Marv has been looked at. I just,
Did they use part of your property for that
they
or?
took quite a bit of my property, yeah.
I was gonna say, how, man, and they just, that's what they.
My
did?
property used to go almost all the way to the switchback.
Wow.
And then they put that drainage, that riprap down through my yard, but they took the yard, so it's not mine anymore.
Well, then it's awesome because then they put like a busy road out in your backyard all summer long of people smelling bricks.
So it was the ground heater that went all winter that bothered me.
Yeah,
Poured
well,
cement. And it popped on like a furnace in the middle of the night right outside the window. Hey there. So. It was fun and exciting, but that was 10 years ago, so. At
Yeah.
least,
wild. Are you ready? He's kind of fine. Gotcha. Like I got this, which,
Yeah, I did email that.
so, yeah, I read it. I read it here like this. So basically. It's nothing that we vote on, right? This is,
I mean,
cause like I told Jim, I'll go through this and,
we've been talking about it for months
yeah.
and we found new information today.
Yeah.
That changed everything.
So it's not anything that we can vote on, anything, it's just,
That's why I put no action taken.
gotcha, so then but I'll still just go through and open it up. I want
I
to,
don't mind explaining.
when we do the public hearing, I'll just go to you and let you explain why, and then we just don't make a motion. You understand that,
I
Ian?
have no idea what you're talking. So no, I don't
We should
understand.
talk about it, or should we wait? and talk?
We'll wait. Yeah, let's wait.
That's what you're supposed to do, correct?
Yeah. We'll just wait. Oh, gosh, I'm like cold to the floor. I'm like freezing.
My house is always clean.
It's weird. I got home yesterday from work and the temperature dropped, it was cold. And I was like, I hot shower, I go for a run. But the run's gonna be miserable for about 10 minutes, and then I was hot the rest of the night.
Really?
I'm sitting
You
in
take
the
a shower
shower.
first and then
You know,
you
I just went to watch it, like, I could God about it. But when I went around, like, I just, because I can take, I could take off there and just sweat.
Yeah.
And-
I love to be,
Just-
I love to be. at that place.
Fine, and then I lost it.
Okay.
I can do that.
Well, it has our running scene.
Yeah, start hiking up here.
I guess I could have just opened this up.
This hike. Go across that way.
Do I have, yeah,
It's just what's small.
I don't recognize it as why I'm asking, but I think I do. It's the one that's highlighted, right?
You just sent this today.
It'd just be fun. The road's always-
So that's what they were just
Yeah,
talking
even-
about. probably.
There's a lot of people that go up there.
Yeah, even with the dusting that we got, didn't get much up there a couple of inches. So it should pack so fast.
Is it
how
our
far-
size?
Yeah, yeah, it gets more up high, because it gets so windblown up there, they can get a little, I think. Crampons and those things, that already was solution to the spikes on those things.
Oh,
Yeah,
well.
dig into this.
Yeah.
yeah, so much for printing
I
on
don't know if you
the.
get very how's that little saddle before the
Yeah.
little bouldering can be.
Yeah,
intimidating.
As far as the election's
Yeah.
concerned,
It's coming down.
Mondays and Wednesdays, I sent you an email, I have midday, but any other time works.
It is.
You have it Monday and Wednesday, I think George.
Were you telling me what else? Go on out.
So I was thinking,
I like to do early in the morning, I have to be out here by 10:30 or 11.
I've seen people out there like,
okay,
they're
I
like.
mean, I'm trying to be flexible.
I sent one last email and I think it was.
I don't, God,
But the problem it is you gotta.
I thought you said Friday was out.
Well, that's 10, that's an agenda.
It's not.
As I said, other than that, I'm real flexible. I just feel really bad about that, but I'm not gonna miss that.
And I thought, I got some stuff, I was gonna email it to you guys, I had to read it
7 point.
ahead of time. And get.
Well, we can, but it's all electronic. You know, it is a different procedure.
Okay.
Hike with my buddies.
But I just feel when he said he had a Tuesdays and Thursdays or whatever, and I'm like, boy,
Well, I sent him an email asking about this. Reach out to that.
mine's every Monday and Wednesday through the end of March. But
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and find out more tomorrow and I'll email you.
I just felt being flexible, you know, it just.
He's working with me.
It comes around.
I was like 6 hours, he's not a runner enough.
Well, I'm glad that we don't have to do it.
But out of
Are.
5 or 6, so that's real introduction. But his dad turned back into the college. But he would have it.
Somebody's here.
Other people were, I'm like, Molly, I was like, don't put Molly.
Right. Are we supposed to get more snow? Because it's kind of like snowing a little bit.
It was through today was the last one.
Yeah, it is, yeah. Yeah,
We
3 to
didn't
5
get
inches shook out, right?
What's that?
Originally, we were talking like 3 to 5 inches.
They were talking south.
Yeah, I was like, it's.
They were talking south of here more and Denver more than here, so I don't know. We're baby wash, so we're paying attention.
It should come in like snow.
Tuesday.
Right.
So, and we,
Yeah.
yeah.
You might have to tell.
It's a.
No.
Maybe.
But it didn't, so we'll see what happens. They don't have it.
Yeah, because Loveland, I think only put it against America.
That's an inch. Maybe 2 inches here.
I was dusting this morning and kind of.
Okay, couple over the minutes, rather than have them written.
They looked okay to me,
Okay,
and it brought up your question on the previous minutes, so, okay, it looked okay to me. If you want to-
For dinner. Friday.
Are they thinking about building?
They were, so they were gonna expect us like we were, I need to get back on and get say what we need. And then they were kind of at our house, I think our house, like after talking, my house, you get a bigger house, like you guys.
Yeah.
1,500 square foot, it's just like, it's
What is your square foot?
13.
I was talking about that married,
Yeah.
you know, when I'm.
So. the refrigerator that has
Somebody in the face,
all the time.
responding.
So you
did it, it's a foul.
I said, they utilize it, I utilize it.
Should you would have sold it, we would have bought it immediately.
Yeah, and that's, they're interested in, but like, I said, it's,
We would have bought
I'm
it.
still a year out.
Well, they told me this.
But I knew that too.
Yeah, but yeah, that's what it's been. I mean, you know, there's like kind of
I said, well, that's good.
strong other stuff. I see you're out. It's like, even though you're not doing some stuff that.
We have 4 minutes after 6.
That's, yeah, I'm kind of like saving it until I'm not so busy with other stuff, but.
Okay, well, we have a quorum and it's after 6, so.
Right, yeah, great. Oh, for
Others aren't here, but.
It's Wednesday, February 15, 2023, 6:06 PM. And I call this meeting to order. January roll call.
Yes, Chairman Krasinski
Here.
and Vulcan.
Here,
Debbie Hep.
here,
That is all of the planning commission that's here tonight.
Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
I'll second it. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Um,
Hey, Tom.
A public hearing special use permit application for an accessory dwelling unit in the historic residential district. For Michael Stavey, property owner of 907 Main Street. And I think there's some changes here, so I will let Rick, the city administrator, speak on that behalf.
So this application we have been kind of working on for several months now. Michael Stavey came to our office months back, and we began to do some research on it. And what we concluded is, at the time, this is a non-conforming situation. It's a contributing home on 907 Main Street, but it has a basement that was converted into an ADU. We don't have any record of when that happened. We estimate at least 35 years ago, but it could have been longer. And the homeowner, when he bought the home, it already had an ADU into it. And so in our deep dive back then, we found little information. And so we were left to try to figure out, is this a legal non-conforming use or illegal non-conforming? And the best information that we got, we had to go back into the ordinances that existed before code. And when we originally read the code, we concluded that there was, you know, as most codes have, you have a use by right, and then you have a special use. So we did mention that in the code, but the way that it was written, it appeared at the time that the section of right by use, and it mentioned the multifamily section, and it gave specific lot areas that were only allowed. And this existed outside that. So we interpreted this as this was an illegally non-conforming use. And then we began to set forward the correct procedure, which would be to do a special use permit in order to bring it up to current code. After doing much more research, even today, we found new information that changes everything. In 1981, that ordinance that was passed before code, the specific area that it mentions, the multifamily section, was actually the new section that the town had bought, and they were reserving that area. Although the way that it was written is a little wonky, because it should have given direction that that's what that was, but it didn't. It just stated that this area is the area that will be allowed by right by use to do a multifamily duplex, such as things like that. Well, that's misleading, because that's not, after spending time with Cindy Neely, because she was on that board who made the decision at the time and explained it, that was not at all what that meant, but it actually meant that that was for that specific area. It did not hinder multifamily in the area, because it was already multifamily in the historic residential. So then that pushed it into a category called legally non-conforming. And so taking a dive into that, there are two parts of the legally non-conforming. You have use and structure. A use would be exactly what they're talking about. This is a basement that was converted to an ADU use, and it was allowed. And so it existed before code. Our current code required a special use permit. It didn't require that back then. And then the other section is called a non-conforming structure. And this was altered, but it was internally altered, not externally. So the structure did not change. It just was altered to make this. So anyways, the more we looked at it, the more it fit the current codes of a legally non-conforming use, which means it's grandfathered in, the use is grandfathered in, and the structure is grandfathered in, as long as the current use is not abandoned. And so you have a year, if it is abandoned more than a year, then it now loses that privilege of being a legally non-conforming to allow a basement. So based on all of this, it is my recommendation to you guys that no action is taken, because it has the right to exist as a legally non-conforming use to use as a basement ADU. But the condition that I have spoke to the applicant already, because there's no action taken, but we currently have a new ordinance that is in first reading right now for ADU service lines, which means all ADUs will have to be conformed to have a separate service lines, or to have an engineer reassess the lines to make sure they are compatible, and that you have a year to comply. So that is coming, and I let him know that he would have to conform to that, but he is free to exist as an ADU. So no action taken.
Good.
Yes, we just don't do anything.
Nothing.
We can't.
And I have the email, I will email Mr. Stavey, my staff report that's signed, and he will continue to exist. So
Oh,
unless Michael has any comments that he would object and oppose my decision.
I just want to thank everybody for working this out. Can you hear me?
Yes,
I do have one question, if that's okay. Does this affect your loan for reeval? What am I trying to say?
so at first, when he was going to refinance,
That's what I'm asking.
it was considered illegally non-conforming,
But now.
but now this would shift
So
it to
that should
legally.
change that.
It should.
That would be my little
Yeah.
concern.
And by giving the letter to him as an official, with letterhead from the town, he should be fine.
Gotcha.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks. Have a good evening.
I think I'll leave now. My part of the session is done.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
So we just do the. That's from the last thing. Approval of the minutes for the regular scheduled meeting of January 18, 2023.
I move we approve those minutes.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Then on to the joint work session with the Design Review Commission regarding proposed ordinance number 5, series 2022. An ordinance amending the Georgetown Municipal Code concerning maximum lot and building sizes for the historic residential zone district. And concerning code amendments related thereto. This is kind of an open discussion, is how we would do it. Sean, you can grab a chair if you want. I think you're the only person to represent DRC. Yeah, Mark, here was the updated maps that you were asking about. I think, right? That was from Jason.
And you guys know about it?
I was kind of as Sean was saying, you're gonna make it usually does the best talking.
I think it was expecting for it to come at 6:30.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, in fact, well, I'm gonna call Cindy now, because I think she wasn't gonna show until 7.
Gosh,
Oh, yeah, but early.
yeah, we kind of went through that real quick. So. Well,
I think our email said like 6:30.
yeah, gotcha.
I'm gonna call her now.
Yeah, yes, yeah, because she speaks the best on this.
She does.
You know, I'm kind of like,
Absolutely.
well, with any of the changes that DRC have found out, either her or Bob or Mark, or maybe they went over it with you on some of it, but
Yeah, it was just due to the mapping.
yeah,
we Did,
yeah.
that we found that it was appropriate to up the.
The 1.4, correct?
Yeah. 0.35. 0.35 is where I thought we went, which.
We went to 0.5, but we did like a smaller meeting. They were pushing for a 0.40, but then with Cindy and with Mark, they were kind of like, I never got a feeling of that, like your size. The question I have,
The issue is that 2,000 square feet. So you had to go up to 76% of the existing,
Hey, Clinton knows that meeting's over, so we're gonna.
get that number up a little higher.
God, this is like, not necessarily construction, but one thing I didn't realize how effective it was, and you probably know better than you all.
Sean.
People that have existing houses, if they want to do something, they're kind of being put in a position where they can't do anything. Is it a small percentage or is it large?
It has to be a fairly small.
Okay,
Because the way I look at that is, I mean, like Sean, you do a lot of work, so if you're doing something with storage work for modeling. There's both sides that people want to add on that seems to be fair. And how much does that affect them? You know, obviously, if you want to add on, 1,000 square foot.
I think we're just divorcing for DRC's coming at 6:30.
Okay, so we'll wait.
Yeah, that's straight.
It's just our findings that we felt that 0.35 was more appropriate.
Yeah, that fits existing houses.
Yeah.
This one actually has a little bit more. Even though it's older. That's a bit more information on. it.
And I know City can go into it much more in depth than.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah. Yeah, we'll give it a bit and see if, I think we're expecting them to show up at 6:30.
Different percentages. First one, that's what you're expecting.
If it's TRC, you show up at 6:30 and it's 7:30. If it's planning commission, we get through our stuff.
Not all has to be something. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think we were talking about it right now. Just-
You want to call?
That'd be great, it's possible.
Yeah.
They brought-
I'll make it you.
Yeah, it's actually, I do that while we're waiting for them to show up.
Well, you know, it's explaining that. Basically, it's the- everything in the report. 3.35. Again, it's full on, they considers multiple lots as a single lot. So that's.
Yeah. We had it, we did do a chart where it had all the different percentages.
Is that what she has?
That's probably what I have here.
Yep. Yeah,
You're looking at.
yeah, I didn't stop at home, I just go right here. But yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, I thought that was really useful.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that chart, but it's. Wasn't in my purview to find it, James. I'm not just on
Just like, yes, I have no excuse. I printed it. That's a different one. Write these down so they don't see anything.
See, that's bad. That's bad luck.
Quick.
I got really good on him a couple of times between breaking an ankle and knee surgery and stuff. And
Right?
my kids are like, man, show us some tricks. I'm like, I gotta be hurt to show you the tricks. I'm get hurt.
Well, I'm used to the forearm ones and those are easy. These.
What did they work?
When I was not in the time. I had a forearm and they just goes, these, they would kill you because you can't really know.
Those things like, it's like, and he goes on steps. I'm like, that shit exists. Oh, yeah. Like, what? That is
I've been crutches once.
that is such a, could you start falling forward and you're like, whoa. I never thought of that. That just seems so crazy to me that just exists. You know, that there's not a better modern solution with technology to make that work.
Right?
She was talking to me about this.
Yeah.
I didn't have any permanent, so.
Right.
I remember seeing it, but I didn't have anything.
Brent and Bob did all that.
That's pretty amazing.
They did it as a vacancy line.
The pen.
Or something like that.
No, it's just a page that summarized it all.
This would be cool if we could do this for the whole town. Just make the city. That's a lot of work. Oh, yeah. But I'd love to see how many empty lots. Right? You look at it, you know.
Ordinance is not.
Farming or whatever, or, you know, but how does that work like this? So when this kind of starts.
Here.
You're like 10,000.
What point of time? They come in and usually say, just keep it's a lot, yeah.
So,
That's all I got. Yeah, I don't know, it's like, I always.
I was looking at more pages since my girl prints.
Once they, you know. Whatever.
I don't know what one does or something.
Thank you,
Thank you, ma'am. Got it. I've got some. This is what that's just more.
What's that? Yeah.
Most of these gonna send in.
Cindy's kind of choosing her way right now. Yeah. But I'm not sure who else. I would assume Bob.
Yeah, Bob is kind of hated. Small. Marco is.
Yeah.
I got this extra piece of going on. Very limited anyway. My pants will.
Yeah.
I don't think that it's better than a lot like yeah, this is summer. I'm not ready to sundress. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good, that's how.
He's right here. We're up here and playing. You might need this.
And you might hear.
No, they said 6:30.
Yeah, we got done early. Sorry about.
If you find that.
Let's see what's going on. Bob is out of town. He has relegated what his skills.
I think you ran over here, Cindy.
Sort of. No, I sort of, it's difficult to run, it's a little icy out there.
Yeah, not too flying around even in full of that.
The last thing.
Maybe not going a little fast, but it's fun.
He's got a learning permit, he didn't even know he's sliding. My wife says, slow down, you know that you're sliding. I'm sure. Well, I can tell that's where to go. I have one purpose. It's fun, that's what.
So I go, it's a little bit further.
Well, I couldn't come to you.
Yeah,
Which is.
yes. It's helpful in these circumstances of right now, it's very.
Yes.
Nothing to do with that variance.
Are we waiting for anybody else, Jen?
Not that I know of unless.
Betsy.
Betsy and I don't, I know that Mark was aware. But
You
they
thought so.
also, yeah. We were set sometime between 6:30 and 7.
Yeah, we were a little, well, our meeting was short, than we thought it would be.
I don't mind calling my Bob and Betsy or
Bob's
Bob's.
on the cruise down.
Oh, yeah, Mexico, yeah.
Well, you can always zoom in.
Yeah.
You want me to call Betsy?
No, because I texted her. She texted me, and asking for the time. I think it's under two.
Ready to move forward?
Sure.
All right, Cindy, I'll let you speak. And I'll give everybody a chance to talk, but I'll let you speak and I'll give any comments off of that. I'll give everybody a chance to speak and have comments off of what everybody has to say.
Okay, well,
So kind of catch us up to where we're at this point.
I think everybody has seen the work that Bob Hamilton and Brent Ganser did to indicate, residence sizes. And, the blue being residence less than 2,000 square feet or less than 2,000 square feet. The red being the above. And we also looked at, and there is a chart in the materials. They also looked at how that related to lot size, how that related to FAR, and with the and you soon come to the understanding that the lot size just varies all over the place and is actually not a very stable figure, because so many of the lots could be subdivided if one chose to. So which of course then would dramatically change an FAR. And so when we were meeting to discuss it, we came to the discussion of really it being the going forward. This is a look backwards, of course, and to go forwards, that we would want to be able to exert some form of control over the size of a house relating to the size of its lot going forward. We met with Craig and Marvin and discussed a number of kinds of possibilities. Right now, the ordinance draft, if this is the latest thing, talked about a FAR of 0.35. What was suggested in our meeting was that, well, several ideas were thrown out to put on the table. One of them was that we could have an FAR that varied according to the size of the lot. In other words, it would be a little bit larger on the smaller lots in order to give the lots of 5,000 square feet and under a more substantial figure, and it could be a little bit smaller on the lots that were over 5,000 square feet. That was one of the suggestions. The other suggestion was, if we were looking at 2,000 square feet as a break point, that actually for a lot of 5,000 square feet is a 0.4 FAR. It's not a 0.35 FAR, it's a 0.4 FAR. There was further discussion about what to do with walkout basements. It was, of course, the developer's point of view that those should not be counted. Mr. Hamilton said, would I please express his strong opinion that they absolutely should be within the count, because they are what visibly can potentially create a three-story view. The discussion with Craig and Marvin, I thought went well. I thought was productive. I have a suggestion in my head, but I'd like to hear from everybody else before I make that suggestion.
I have nothing more to add, except that I was not familiar with the idea that some places are 0.4 already. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that what we used on this map was a 2,000 and under.
Right,
That on a 5,000 lot,
right.
that would be a 4.4 FAR.
Ah, I see. If you had maxed.
Yes, but going forward, if you had a 5,000, you had a 0.4, it would allow you up to a 2,000 square foot house. But there are a number of lots that are legally non-conforming that have 4,000 square feet, that have 4,200 square feet, that have 3,750 square feet. And the 0.4 would allow those lots a little better, a little more space to, if we decided that the 0.4 was something we wanted to do. And then, maybe you graduate up to a 0.35. But that was the tenor of the discussion. Yes, Sean?
I have
And,
nothing to
and
add.
your comment,
Yeah.
um,
Well, what do you think about upping it, downing it?
I have a little bit of concern about it, in that I have particular sympathy for people who are on a 3750 and may want to, have a little bit more flexibility. Although there are ways architecturally of solving that, of the various ways of solving needs. I'll just put it that way. I'm still in favor of the 0.35 because if the majority of the houses in the historic district are if 75% are still within
It's 2,000.
within the 2,000 square feet, that if everything that's new therefore becomes larger, then it has a greater impact on the nature of the neighborhood. So if it stays at that, and some people might have 7,500 square feet, and those can be bigger and still maintain reasonable side yards and such. But that would be my concern with going up to the 0.4. That we have a greater impact from the new houses than we have from the old houses.
So you sort of diminished the point of doing this.
Yeah.
And thinking, I just, for aesthetics purposes, I think the bigger houses that take up so much of the property are just a really bad idea. And with the nature of what we have now, they're sore thumbs, in my opinion. The houses that, if they go much above 0.35 personally.
yeah, because what does that put us for square footage from 0.35 to 4 on a 3,750 square foot lot? Say 4,000 square foot. So it goes from
1312 is at 0.35. That's for 3750. 3750 times 0.4, that makes it 1,500.
So I mean, how does that fit with a historical structure or a new house? Does that become too big?
On,
That's-
on a 3750. Yeah, because that's sort of my point on the 0.4. You're dealing with a range of lot sizes.
I think the other thing to remember is that most of the houses that are above the 0.35 are on larger lots already, so they don't increase the density or the feeling of density within a neighborhood.
Yeah, that's where lots get a little strange, because many of those houses sit on multiple lots that have not been turned into one lot legally. So at some point, some future person, maybe not the people who are living there now, but some future person could decide that they want to sell off pieces. I mean, and yes, we go up and down the streets and there are lots of sort of, that happens more frequently than you might think.
Okay.
And so it's, when you look at some of these, that's why I said the lot size is sort of a flexible thing.
Mhm.
If you're sitting on, if you have one house currently sitting on 3 lots that are still determined lots, but you're counting that whole square footage because you only pay one tax bill,
Mhm.
then that confuses the whole relationship of those houses to that lot. And so what we're doing is saying that is the picture of our past. I mean, I think that what we're talking about is how we're going to approach our future. And I also.
Well, we did
believe-
set a max in here of lots. So that somebody couldn't form, say, even a 20,000 square foot lot. I think 10,000 was the number we set.
Yeah, that was kind of what started.
And is that a reasonable number? Should that come down?
Well, I think that that's a perfectly reasonable number, Kathy. What I'm saying is that if right now somebody has a house that's sitting on 4 lots,
Right,
but they are only, those lots have never been, those lot lines have never been erased. They've never made it one piece of property.
mhm,
And they then always have the option of selling off those other lots. If in the future, if when somebody comes in, and this is actually what's been happening, and they want to put on a larger house and they have 2 lots, they've had to take the lot line out in order to do it. And then you do have one larger piece of property and you know that you have that. And I think as we move forward and look at things and we look at the plans, we're going to say, all right, what is the land that you're counting
mhm.
for this house, and we can't have it all divvied up with lot lines.
Which, let me ask you a question, Rick, on. It's odd to me that it's possible that somebody could have 2 lots built in the middle of those lots, but then still have 2 non-conforming lots. Is that possible?
Yeah, but because it's non-conforming, you can't create a new non-conforming use out of it. They would have to be eliminated or a lot line moved in order to create this correct setbacks.
Perfect.
So that could not be built on until that was changed.
But if the structure wasn't on the additional lot, then you run into an issue.
Gotcha, and then so that's.
But then you're down to 2 5,000 square foot lots, or let's just use that as an example.
Which kind of was a starting point, so that you. Kind of the way that I look at it is if I want a bigger 3,000 square foot house, I can buy 2 5,000 square foot lots, eliminate the lot line, and that gets that size of house. Correct?
Yeah.
So I think that, I don't know if anybody had necessarily an issue with that,
No,
but I think like that 5,000 square foot to the 7,000 square foot. Maybe it came up shy, which we could listen to the audience speak on that. I think that's where issues were popping up maybe. But I don't necessarily think it was the 3,750 square foot. You know, what we decide on that. I don't know how affected. How much, so I mean, do we have 3 separate, before it was just kind of like basically everything up to that 7,000 square foot, correct?
it's everything up to.
It seemed like from 5 to 7, you were kind of,
The 5 to, what we changed was the setbacks on lots over of 7,500 and over.
okay, gotcha.
And we did not change anything about the style.
So if you took a 5,000 square foot lot times 0.35, that's 1,750.
Right.
It's very small. So if you went,
0.4
Well,
is
it's not
2,000 square
very-
foot.
Yeah,
right, 7,500 times 0.35.
Is there either
625.
which is actually, larger than in square footage, than some of the houses that have been recently built. So it provides. I mean, I would not, quite frankly, I would not mind seeing the graduated ones so that you could do 0.4 at 5,000 square feet and under, and 0.35 on everything above it. And 0.35 on a 10,000 square foot lot is 3,500 square feet of house,
Yeah, which
which is big.
for historic Georgetown, is that with most of the lots being non-conforming, are there any 5,000 square foot lots in historic Georgetown, or most fall like the 3,750, 4,000 square foot? I think?
No, most of them are not non-conforming. We just, a number of them that are left are non-conforming because the non-conforming ones tend to be down.
Okay, got it, because that's what I'm curious on these lot sizes, what fall in historic part with most of the lots.
Well, and actually, your chart actually tells you the lot size.
Yeah, I was looking through that.
As you run down it, and so you can pop out the ones that are really non-conforming And every once in a while you hit the one that's 2,500, but most of them you would see 5,000, 5,000, 5,000. And things above 5,000, and then every once in a while you get a 2,500. But you just look at the list and no, you can't say that most of the lots.
So in any of these where you have listed lot sizes, is this all exactly lot sizes, or could you have had a parcel with 4 lots combined?
This is the parcel size. It is
So
not,
it's not,
it is not the size of a lot.
Gotcha.
No,
It's
and
the
that's-
size that person is paying taxes on.
Right. Well, that's what's tough, because that's where I would love to have that information on what.
But that's where it could be a little misleading, because the lot could be sold and then that floor area ratio would then shrink.
Well, I would.
Yeah.
To sell off. The remainder.
You say it again?
Well, you wouldn't be able to sell off the remainder. If you came in and said, I've got a 10,000 square foot lot and I want to build a house yay big. Then if you built it that big, then the other piece of land, I mean, what you sell off would have to be less
Correct. It
than a
depends.
legal lot.
Depends on where it is on the lot, if you could sell it off.
No.
If it,
No, it's
Yes.
just square footage.
Now, if you have declared that is the lot that goes with this house, then that's the lot which goes with that house. If you're taking out the lot line,
yeah, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about it's separate lots. Like
okay,
there's a home and you're counting the whole thing as a parcel.
right,
Then the other lots could be sold off and then the
Correct.
floor area ratio would go up.
strong.
No, I would assume that if you built the house that you said you were gonna build on the 10,000 square foot lot. And it was bigger than it would have been if it were on a 5,000 square foot lot.
But that's not what he's asking. He's asking about existing house. An existing house that is sitting, yours, mine, that is sitting on a number of city lots that you pay one tax bill for. Your house sits on one of those lots. You could, and to the floor area ratio, we are counting all of those lots. For the lot of where your house is. If you sell off those other pieces, your floor area ratio goes up like this.
That's what I'm saying. You should not be able to sell off a smaller portion. In other words, you'd have to
If
maintain.
you're all 5,000 square feet, who can legally stop you?
Well, if it hasn't, we haven't eliminated a lot line. So here's how I look at it. So if I own a lot right here and I live on this house and I own 2 of the lots, even though I'm paying 1 tax on it, if it's still its own piece of lot, you can't. How can you tell somebody now they can't sell that lot because the FAR is too much? They should still be allowed to sell that lot.
Like the Presbyterian,
It's
Can't
separate.
stop them.
the Presbyterian Mates.
Right.
There's like 3 parcels behind it.
Right,
They can easily sell those off and build homes right on top of it.
of course. I'm not
That's
saying.
what I was getting at, yeah.
No, I'm just saying that if you come in, let's just say, I'm somebody who wants to build a big house. But I'm looking at my land and it's got 2 lots on it. They're both 5,000 square feet. I come in and I want to build, I don't know, a 3,000 square foot
You have to eliminate
house.
the lot line and make it 1 lot to make that work with whatever.
Okay, so but you can't, in other words, they can't sell off the other 5,000 once they've built the bigger house.
Well,
You
yeah.
have to essentially have said,
Yeah.
you have to create, in order to get that FAR, you have to create this as well.
Well, the whole
Okay.
idea is to make it easier so that you tell, so that people actually know what they can do. Because right now, kind of nobody does, within reason. I mean, right? I mean, that's to go, okay, you can do this, you can do this, or you can do this. But you
I
would
think
have
this
to,
is
you could,
pretty, just, I mean, if that's what
Yeah.
this is written as, and I have not read over the whole new piece. Then I think that's fine, but I don't think you can say I'm gonna build on this 5,000 piece. And I'm not gonna remove that lot line, but you're building as if you are building on a 10,000 square feet. That's what I'm saying. That was my issue.
That is-
I think that's a really rare example, but I hear what you're saying. I think the more common example that we're gonna see are when people have existing lots that are separate from their parcel that they have a home on. And then those lots will be sold off in the future. That's a more realistic example than someone who has a 10,000 square foot lot and then has to subdivide or, create a line. That's not, and on top of it, there's challenges with an FAR on top of that, because that's what you're saying. The house would be appropriate, but now when you split, now it's not appropriate.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah,
We can't-
I think it's a rare example.
Okay,
Yeah, that would be creating a new non-conforming, but that's not what we were talking about before. It was
okay,
the current lots that are separated that are future buildable lots. And right now, this is skewed because it's kind of showing if someone has 4 lots, but there's a house on it, the FAR shows low and it kind of makes it seem like it's a smaller FAR, but that's not the reality. The reality is that should have only been looked at the lot and then the lots would have been separate.
And that's why we started looking at actual size. of the
Yes, versus the house.
square footage.
Be brought to our attention when somebody comes in.
Oh, yeah, we have a flow. Yes.
So
yeah,
we'll be able to check.
Well, you want to make sure too, because if the FAR gets skewed for the houses that are there. I mean, and basically, if the lot, doesn't matter if you own the 3 lots surrounding your house. I mean, it does, because that's what we're based off of, and people only want to pay 1 tax on it, but if those lots are separate, it doesn't technically matter who owns it. I think it's wrong to eliminate what they can do with those lots.
Well, you can't.
Right, but
You can't believe
But
it.
where I'm kind of going with that is if we put an FAR and it's how it fits historic. Basically, if you have a house that sits here, now we change the FAR and then they want to do a room addition, they can't because it drops them below that because they sold their other 3 lots that was connected to that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You kind of
but
what I'm saying? So does that,
They have to, they know that. I mean, that's, yeah.
yeah, but do they? Because all this stuff changes. So if I buy a house.
Yeah.
If I buy a smaller house and I want to add just 1 little room, but I've got 3 other lots that I think I'm going to sell off to finance that, but then I do, and now all of a sudden my FAR doesn't work and I can't add to that.
yeah, that's,
So we want to make this easier, not harder for people too, but I don't know how much that affects that and for what FAR ratio that.
Well, that's why I
Does that
like
make
the
sense,
idea of
Chris?
having a higher FAR for smaller lots. Because it still gives that
It gives them
potential.
a little bit of flexibility.
you know, one question I would have, and I'm trying to visualize where this might be the case in town. There aren't that many places where, let's just say you have 4 5,000 square foot lots in a row, separate owners. And each one comes in and builds the max, and so at that point. You've changed the scale of the neighborhood. Because right now, they tend to go small, big, small, I mean.
Well, yes, they went up in various spots and blocks.
Right. It makes us
fairly
fit, yeah.
steady rhythm
Right,
going along, and I think, yeah, I would just say we're trying to get in the future, the house to fit a lot better. We're not
Right.
trying to.
right. So
utilize
if you
it.
had an FAR of 4,000, of 4
One for you,
on a 5,000 square foot lot, what's the max?
2,000.
Yeah,
2,000? My house is 2,100 for the basic house. Can be a pretty big house.
Yes, it's a fair sized house,
Yeah.
yeah. But it's also not a huge house.
The basement, the house without the basement, is 18,
That's a 3-bedroom.
3750.
Yeah, you can do it.
You can, well, on 3,750, you're kind of stuck.
Right. But that's what I'm kind of going over in my head with sizes and that. Cause I have a 3750 lot.
But your house looks good on your lot, so.
Yeah, the basement.
That's a
I have
big-
1,800 square feet. Yeah,
Well, I mean,
it's just the visual, that's
Yeah,
all I'm
right.
looking at, right?
No, because I quite frankly would, well, and if we want everybody else to speak.
Yes.
Yeah.
Speak if you
Please
would.
do.
Yeah, definitely. You're an architect.
Goes first. Well, that's why.
Speaking of those words, yeah.
I've kind of just gotten my nose wet with this stuff. I became aware of it. The end of last year. I understand it's been going on since mid last summer. And I'm not sure where to start. first, I guess, the general statement, yeah, I think considering new zoning regulations in any jurisdiction is a big decision. And a lot of, an impact needs to be considered across the board, which I understand is what's been going on, but what I'm hearing about both, the conversation about the lots and, okay, if I have 5 contiguous lots, what we have is flawed data is what I hear, that, some of it may be good, some of it may not be good. I think it's
Good
only
data.
fair to,
Where did you hear that this was flawed data?
you guys just said, no, right, so I'm sorry, let me, look at it. This is what we did. No, so,
In the day, it just
so let me,
doesn't.
well, all right, let me rephrase it, or I'll start here, the handout I got, several properties.
I think the point is that the conversation leading up to this was that the FAR in a number of these situations it contemplates parcels that are comprised of 4 or 5 separate lots. And therefore,
That's it.
if you sell, and you guys have just articulated yourself, if you were to sell off 1 or more of those lots, the FAR in here becomes inaccurate, which changes your percentages, which is becoming a topic of conversation. Yes, it does. It's math. It changes your percentages, which has become a topic of conversation about where to draw that threshold.
It
Right.
changes one, I agree with you, Craig.
So
that it
that's all.
changes-
That's all I was saying, is inaccurate data. I don't discount the work that was done. And what, no,
It's not inaccurate.
let me try to say it a different way. The FAR that are on this
Accurate for what exists.
for contiguous lots or for a contiguous parcel. That can be, that, right? And from what you're saying, that,
It's
okay,
accurate for what exists at the moment. What we're saying is that it is possible for what exists at the moment to change. It doesn't mean that these numbers are incorrect
okay, let me,
inaccurate. Or flawed.
okay, let me state it this way. Basically what the FAR should be calculated based on the plot of land, the boundaries of that plat, the property boundaries, not of a parcel of that the house sits on. Not that, I'm not sure why that's confusing to you. Right, I mean, we have a lot, say you just have one lot, 5,000 square feet.
Right.
Let's call it a 10,000 square feet lot, that whatever size lot, doesn't matter. You have a lot and you own the next 2 lots next to it. You're telling me that this house in these numbers are calculated based on, and maybe I'm not understanding, if this house is being calculated on these 3 parcels, and that's the FAR that this data shows, right? Yes?
Yes.
Yeah, it shows the data for what the person is paying a single tax on.
That, but taxes and FAR. So my point being that if this house is on a lot, this owner owns 2 other lots, and like you've been saying, okay, I decided I'm gonna sell off this lot. But the bottom line is, it shouldn't change his FAR. His FAR should be based on his lot that house is on.
The pre-existing
And
lot
that's
is
not-
not separate, unless the lot line is eliminated.
Run right straight through their house.
Well, and in which case, I was asking.
That's what I was asking on.
In that case, you almost have to either assume that if someone sells that house, they're not gonna cut it in half and keep half or whatever, right? I mean, in a situation like that, if it's a non-conforming that does straddle 2 lots, then those 2 lots either need to be redivided into a conforming lot for the one house, and that one house can then be calculated to that FAR. If the next adjacent lot to that one, this person still owns, this house straddles 2 lots, that FAR, they can't sell the one lot that the house is straddling half of, they can still sell this lot. again, that lot has its own FAR. This lot, or the double lot, however you want to call it, that a house is on, that's its FAR. So there's not, so that discussion in my mind is,
I
doesn't
think,
apply.
I think
I think it's the wrong discussion entirely, incidentally. I think it's the wrong, it's not,
I don't think,
I-
why?
it's because yes, we could go back and look at all of these properties that and say, what does their actual, because we're taking this off of tax records, because that's the quickest way to get to them. We could go back and say, okay, in each of these cases, we're going to look at what the lot structure is of each of these houses. And that would give us, yes, that would certainly give us a difference in some of these FARs. I certainly would agree with that. And I also say, yes, this is where we stand at the moment. What we are talking about is our future. And what we're talking about is saying that in our future, we want to make sure that we understand what the lot size and that we relate that house to that lot size. And so we're not trying to correct our past. And I would say that, yes, Craig, it changes one of the things on the front. The things it doesn't change is the line that says 194 of or 76% of these residents are 2,000 square feet or less in living area. That is still the correct figure, and what we are looking at is the size of a house in living area. So we have 76% of our houses that are under 2,000 square feet. We don't want to suddenly have 76% of our houses that are over 2,000 square feet.
Go into this 1 second. As a realtor for 30 years, and one familiar with county records, and one familiar with not 90% of these homes here, I can tell you that figure is very, very low. That figure is very, very low of homes less than 2,000 square feet. I can go through and show you. There are a lot of this too. You want to count any walkouts? There are walkouts in this that weren't counted. There are what you call, one level is what, a basement? Well, the basement, when you walk into a garage, is not a basement. And there's also a lot of additions. The county doesn't have, the county records are not up to date. They don't go in and measure every home, every year or every 2 years. They simply take the old records and whatever is given to them. For example, I can show example after example of how there are more than my figure, according to what you had, my figure has a 56, well, I took figures of 1,500 or above. And out of the 1,500 above, based on your records, you have 121 homes of that large. Okay. And that's, yes, it is. Over 1,500 square feet or 121 homes, larger than.
And then why did you choose 1,500?
What?
Why did you choose?
Because the initial ordinance was 30%. Am I correct?
Yes,
That's why.
but
Which would,
Okay.
but.
you noticed we didn't.
5,000 square feet.
That's what was passed on first reading.
Yes, I understand that, but you.
Nobody's showing up on first reading.
But I'm just saying, I think really, I dealt with county records. I can,
But we're
you know,
not,
I can sit down and give you a list of homes, and I'm gonna say you're probably, the square footages of the 2,000 above are probably at least 20% more. That's, and.
but that's what this shows.
What?
That's what it shows.
but we're arguing about,
Well, remember this, the whole idea of this is for historic Georgetown on what kind of best fits, you know, what numbers can we get to keep the percentages kind of flowing in the same direction? So I mean, and I'm not arguing against what you say. What's that? Oh, so if you take, and two, historic is kind of a loose word, the aesthetics of
Okay,
historic
but
Georgetown.
you already have, you have setback controls. You have, footing controls, you're gonna have a certain coverage. You have height controls. You have DRC controls. And now you want another control.
Yes,
Right
we
on top of all that.
Yes, we do, because your lot coverage in my 5,000 square foot lot, your lot coverage is 40%. I can put a 2,000 square foot house on that with a 2,000 square foot second floor, making a 4,000 square foot. And then if you want to have my walkout basement, I can get 5,000 square feet on my 5,000 square feet. Now, it is very difficult.
That's probably not entirely true if you consider the slope of the lot. So that's.
Yeah, so I'll
That's not entirely true.
I'll take the
You-
basement.
you may actually.
I'll take the basement out, so I only have a 4,000 square foot house on my 5,000 square foot. lot, and that is possible. It's not done, but it is possible. There is more open lot space in this historic district. Are a lot, if the preponderance of our historic homes, not all of them, but the preponderance of our historic homes are smaller, and they are easily overwhelmed by the larger things, a group of larger things that would go around them. It is very difficult for the DRC to not abide by the area. It's not that we can't, but it is extremely difficult for us to look at people who walk through the door with a nice plan. They've looked at their area bulk regulations, they know what they are, and we look at them. We have done it, but it's not a position you want to be in. Is to say, I'm sorry, because you have smaller historic houses around you. You cannot build that house. You can't, and they point to their area bulk regulations and say, but it says I can. And it's very difficult if your design guidelines and your area and bulk zoning regulations are at odds with each other. And we're trying to make it so that doesn't happen to us. on a regular
Yes,
So this all comes about, Cindy, because of the 3 homes in Main Street, which you're saying were
Oh,
all.
no, actually, it doesn't.
here's.
No, it doesn't.
Those homes in Main Street are not bulky, in fact, they fit within
Yes, they
the
do.
realm of everything.
Well, so here's a better way.
See, as far as the market is concerned, as far as Georgetown is concerned. And first of all, sure, somebody may do that. That's a possibility. And I'm not gonna put out, that's his house there. I'm not gonna build. Yes. But why doesn't, it's the way our structure is. Georgetown developed, each generation built upon their homes. Correct? My home, I can see that, that's what gives it great character. You have each generation, I had the Allen generation, I had the Steen generation, the Johns, my generation, we all added on. What as far as his homes are concerned, and Sean brought up a home, Sean did a home right next door to me. That's way above everything, right, Sean? Malcolm's home, yeah. But it's beautiful, it's one of the most photographed homes, people going down that street. You can say it's out of place, that's your someone's opinion, and my opinion is beautiful. And what a bar does, and the bar also hurts. I don't know how many times when people come into Georgetown, they look at the homes, great, they're nice, they're beautiful, I want to live here, I want to have a family here, we want those kind of people. We want people who want families, we want people who are invested or vested into this community. And if you turn around, if you put a bar on a lot like we were talking about, the family comes in, you want to average a house, you want, a lot of homes are like this. Okay, you open it up, well, you just increase the floor area. Now you can't do that. And I think you are stopping growth within Georgetown, or stopping what has occurred throughout the years and throughout our generation.
Well,
You want to-
let me say this first. So, and this is between like you and Tom, okay? One thing I learned when I moved here is I bought a lot with no real idea of what I could do on it. I kind of had ideas. This wasn't an historic area. You know, throughout a couple of years, I figured out pretty quick what I can do. If I'm a new homeowner and I come to you, I'm like, hey, I'm gonna buy this lot, what can I do? Well, you could maybe introduce me to Tom, and Tom could probably go, well, I think you do this, but you gotta go through DRC. You could spend a lot of money, thousands of dollars, by fitting what you think fits, and then have DRC go, yep, this really doesn't work. The whole, let me finish real quick. The whole idea of a square footage, it helps. If we can make this work with DRC that, and it doesn't, I don't have the perfect, idea of what that square footage is. That's what we're trying to come to conclusion to. But if I'm like, cool, I buy this lot, I can do a 2,000 square foot house. I go to Tom and have him draw it up, and it's going to go through DRC or 2,500 square foot, whatever that number is that fits. It helps that process, because one thing early on, a lot of people have bought lots here and then turned around and sold it because they never got anything built because they couldn't figure out what
If
to
that's the
build.
only criteria, fine.
Well, it doesn't fit the
You have footing criteria. That
Yes.
is focusing. And you have other criteria, as far as Tom is concerned, he's gonna scratch his head. I've got to build this, then I gotta make sure we don't have, the living room up, or the bedrooms upstairs are not 12 by 12 or 11 by 11. You'll spend more money, believe me, in trying to do
Keep those
this.
buildings, so how-
What?
Yeah, I built a lot of houses everywhere, and to me, square footage, square footage. Well, it's design is more of a historic thing. That's why I would go to Tom. Tom lives here. He's done a lot of it. But I don't like the argument you're trying to make over stuff that's been built. That the stuff that's been built is fine. I don't think anybody's arguing against that. It's more on the lower spectrum and the higher spectrum that we're looking at. The FAR, as far as existing houses, you guys probably know better than I do. What's there? We don't want to eliminate people with what they have of being able to add on to that either. How does it fit?
I'd like to just make two comments, and the first one is to you. A lot of the reason that people come to this town and they like it and they want to be here is because of its character. And it has that character because, and it's a National Register landmark district. It means there aren't that many of them throughout the whole United States. Okay, so if you start building things that are out of scale with this, the district diminishes. I mean, not in size, but it diminishes in its character.
And I haven't seen that over my 45 years. What happened, I've been here 45 years, I've been here a long time. I've sold homes for 30 years, I've not seen that. How is our district diminished by what comes in? All I know, but you're right, the character of this, your description is great. And I agree totally with that. I also know that when people come here and they buy into here, a lot of them have families and a lot of them don't. The character of Georgetown is exactly that. Come to mind. I can show you the 3 or 4 different generations of development, and that's the character.
To avoid, though, it also is that we nationalize our historic structures.
And this is only for historic, it's not for the whole town. But
If you wanna-
Craig, you wanted to say something too, so.
Go.
Well, they like.
Because Craig, you've been here forever and you are built very successful, so.
Well. I agree with Kathy, and I agree with Cindy's perspective on the National Historic Landmark District. I'm a fan. It's part of why I chose to raise my family here. It's part of why I kick and scream so that my kids have the choice to raise their families here. So I'm all in on the character of the Historic Landmark District. I'm all in on the Historic Residential District, the Historic Business District. I'm in. I'm the guy, I am the guy out there promoting the protection of that every day. Like, and so is Tom. Like, we're in the trenches like you used to be, actually promoting and it by complying with. And this is the point of my comment here, and then I'm not going to speak anymore tonight because I don't think we're being all that productive. The design review guidelines in our land use code as they exist today were very, very thoughtfully considered. And I thought, they were very well done. And they were done with the advice of land use professionals, design professionals, all in a room at one time, considering not any one part of them, but considering them in the whole. And the consequences of manipulating any one element of those guidelines or codes, what effect those manipulations would have on another one. With all due respect to both boards that have spent a lot of time discussing this, I don't believe that that's what's happened here. I believe that what's happened here is we've chosen to react to a condition. And we started with a premise, which is fine, you've got to start someplace. But we haven't then gone through, and no disrespect, I know you have a lot of experience in this, I know you do too. We all have our experiences that we bring to this. But in the context of a couple of documents that were written with professional objective guidance with no emotion in it, I've got emotion in this. I own a property in the historic residential district. I get it. We've all got emotion that's part of this. But we develop these things without emotion, right? And you were a key part of that. You were a key part of that. You know that I'm correct. We looked to professionals. We provided our opinion. They worked our opinions and the reality of the physical environment into a document that we've lived with now for quite some time. And very effectively.
20+ years, yeah.
Very effectively. I mean, I think the DRC has put on a fantastic job of applying the guidelines. I think they've been objective in their considerations. I mean, the first time I applied for a certificate of appropriateness was not under this current set of guidelines. It was in the prior set that you want to talk about, but not knowing what you can do. I mean, it was the wild, wild west. And then we sat down with professionals and said, help us create a document that we can all live with and that the community will understand and will accomplish the goal of protecting our historic landmark district. Boom, done. Let's not pick one piece of it and tweak it because we see that there is there's a very specific and immediate problem that we are trying to address. We have to consider it in a grand context. That's all I'll say to that.
I just wanted to respond to one thing. It's not like this is tweaking one thing. I mean, you're seeing it as tweaking one thing, but one of the things that the existing guidelines, as a matter of fact, states, and as to our zoning code, is that the buildings that are within the historic district are to be of a scale similar to those that are around them. And over the last 25 years or so, well, no matter how many years, let's just say even with 20 years, people have wanted more and more house. And that's fine too. And that's fine too. But I think, what happens is if you have a way of designing to a certain size, and I understand what you're following, but at some point you learn how to design to that size and you learn how to do something. I'm not talking you personally, I'm talking the general you. Pretty soon you're changing the scale of the neighborhoods. We talked in design guidelines about the scale of what a house should be. And Cindy was absolutely right when she said, but there are enough issues here that if you look at what we had before of the not the floor area ratio, but the just size of the building on a lot, that you end up building by doing that something that's bigger. Let's say we're correcting or making this piece of it fit into the other piece of it more clearly.
I completely understand what you're saying.
Okay.
I completely understand and
Thank you.
appreciate what you're saying. By referencing how we develop these, what I'm implying is I'm not convinced that FAR is the right tool for the job. I think it's a tool, but I think there are other tools out there, and that if we were actually doing this in the way that we develop the guidelines and actually bringing objective third parties into this conversation, they would give us options for addressing just the issue that you're trying to address. We're not the first community to deal with this by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, we're way down the line. And those communities have attacked this in a number of different ways. FAR is one of them, but it's rare that FAR is the only tool. FAR is usually applied in the context. FAR is usually applied in the context of.
Talk to Cindy about that one. I don't.
FAR
I'm just clear.
Listen, we can argue about the data or who and.
Yeah,
but-
but it's not the only tool by any means, Greg. We have a lot of tools in the design guidelines that are more difficult to use when
But you're-
area in bulk does not. assist.
I completely agree, but there are quantitative ways of assessing. Massive scale in area and bulk, and FAR is not. Typically used as the only tool to do that, because it's not, honestly, it's not entirely effective. And there are other tools, and I.
The tool will be
My
entirely.
point being that if we were to consider this as thoughtfully as we did when we created these guidelines and regulations that we're talking about changing, we might have our eyes open to other alternatives that would be even more effective and less of an impediment to the community, but be equally as effective in accomplishing what I interpret the desire to be, which is to limit the massive scale of new construction and additions to existing historic structures in the historic residential district. That's my summation of the reason why we're here. I haven't heard it articulated that way, but that's what I've gleaned over the last couple of months.
Can I talk about my house?
What?
Sure.
I want to talk about my house. My house. Yeah. It's a great big house.
You're making a block of me.
Beautiful house, but thank you. My house was built in 1876. It had a beautiful big backyard. And it had a beautiful big side yard. It was appropriately built for the size of the lot. Since that time, a little house got stuck in the back, so I have a 12-foot backyard. I have no room on the right-hand side. In other words, it's a very, very compressed, contained yard. I think that's fine, but this is what we're talking about. Like, let's not create a scenario in which you can crowd in houses, or you can create larger scale against what is the historic district. So historically, the house I'm in should have had a very big yard, like Hamil's house or somebody else.
So, like, well, you're talking the opposite, what you're going through town, your house is a big house, get there, and then little houses built around you. Yeah, so they're saying little houses here and big house built within you. Well, yeah, because that's what's now happening, is that the reverse of that is happening. It's also interesting, Craig, because yes, we do have some other tools. We have tools actually in the design review guidelines that we do not use. One of those tools is we should start to use this one, and I don't think it's going to thrill anybody, because your house cannot be 5 feet above the historic structures within 300 feet of you.
Average of the historic structure.
The average of this historic structures that are it's the average of historic structures, 300 feet. That's what that guideline says. And we can really start to, and one of the things that can grow out of this for the DRC is, okay, you want to put a house right here. Well, we will look then at the mass and scale all around it, and we don't care what size your lot is, etc. We will let the mass and scale of the houses that are within that radius of you determine what you can do. And so
And that, I think what you're getting.
I think that it is more generous, actually, to establish an FAR and to say that we did not seek professional discussions, these two commissions met several times, with a planner to discuss exactly this. The planner is not currently employed by, but certainly is a professional planner, certainly has worked in some of these. And of course, yes, I worked with Winston Associates, and be careful what you say about those very first, guidelines that President and I wrote them in front of his fireplace.
I'm just saying it was bad now, we're way back.
Oh, my.
So. Yeah, I understand that.
What the DRC will start to do is do that, but it's
And-
going
and
to
what
give
then-
a ruckus.
I think I get what you're saying, and because I don't disagree that there's a imbalance between the design guidelines and the zoning regs.
That's right.
And I've witnessed that myself.
Yes.
It's right behind us, right?
Yeah.
You know, that's the one I always, and
Yeah,
so
right behind us.
what needs to happen in that scenario, whether it is, and I don't know what the issue, the guidelines then, like say, if those guidelines are gonna be enforced that way, need to be, more than just an opinion. And I think that's what you're getting at with an FAR. I mean,
Yes.
but before we go there, I think back to Craig's point of different tools, I have a lot of comment that I'm not gonna get to tonight, and I think it's worth getting to tonight at the work session. But one of them, I've been practicing architecture, licensed in the state for 25 years. Mainly residential, I've done commercial multifamilies with firms, and in all those years, I don't recall the last time I ran across a floor area ratio that I had to contend with. I mean,
But how many of those areas were historic areas?
Yeah, how many landmark districts do you work in?
but look, here's one. I mean,
Any place else?
I don't know how many of those were historic, but I get the point being, my FAR is more typically used as a density control in higher density urban areas, bigger. We can't have, we have to minimize our square footage, so we have fewer cars plugging up our streets. That's not the issue that the town has. The town has set parcels. It's set for a single family residence. I think what Craig's getting at, FAR is putting a layer of restriction on top of our existing codes that should and have been providing good input and varying degrees of compliance and or acceptable. Again, there's some imbalance there that we're trying to resolve, but maybe it's not forcing someone to say, not, you're 10 feet too big, I mean, as a designer, I don't know how many times I, especially with existing stuff, we're doing a addition to a house, man, I wish I could move that wall 6 inches, and I can't do it because that's a law, or in this case, I can't do it because I'm up against an FAR. And I don't think that it's again, back to density control and it's a restriction that can be dealt with other, we've got tools. Yeah, we have floor area coverage, we have lot coverage, we have building height.
It's not Florida coverage.
It's lot coverage, yeah, lot coverage, and we have building height issues or building height. And like on a slope lot, for example, I've worked in jurisdictions where you have a slope lot and this is the building height. As opposed to, this is just an example of different tools or different ways to maybe think about how we're looking at it. That's our building height instead of, we'll take our average grade and now our building height, and then which allows, a situation like this, if you're on a slope site, your house isn't going to poke through this plane. It's similar to a bolt plane, but your house is going to step down the lot with that. So you don't get that 3-story there's, I mean, there's other issues with verbiage in here.
Wait, Tom, let me ask you this question, not to interrupt. And this all really kind of started off of not all the in-betweens, but the smallest to the biggest. You know, and so that's where that lot coverage, if you have a 10,000 square foot lot and you do 40% lot coverage, that's gigantic.
That's an
But
8,000 square
on the other
foot.
side, but also on the other side of it, you know, too, if it's within DRC's power through codes that's already in place, then that should be able to be regulated, correct? And maybe it's just not being, and also on the lowest scale too, if you do 40% on a 3,750 square foot lot. But is that kind of a DRC thing? That's where this all kind of started on how do we
Yeah, but-
control the
Well, I think,
the lowest? to
you
the
know,
highest?
I don't know, I think the issue there is, you know, DRC, I don't,
So somebody,
I think it's that if you deny a project because it doesn't fit a house size that is within average of the 300-foot radius, and the owner says, well, that's screwed, I'm gonna sue the town because the zoning codes allow me to do this. So, and I think you're just trying to get a balance between that and that. The FAR, again, it's math and scale, it's not square footage. And yes, square footage. Excuse me, yeah, but it's also,
scale.
but again, back to the regulations, that's more of a density thing than a size thing. It can be, but my issue with the, and you know, my issue with the FAR, just, yeah,
It is only one tool, and we know that it is only one tool, but it is the kind of a tool that permits us, and it really, it permits us for the guy who has the 3,750 square
Can I,
feet, and he is, you know, piling house on house, and then doesn't understand the concept of the fact that you can have a story of half, and you try to bring it down, but he's within his 25 feet, because from his mid-gable and stuff, and the argument, the imbalance between those two, between the guidelines and the area and bulk regulations is a difficult thing.
So here's something that's changed in Georgetown. The appreciation rate in houses. Like, thank God I bought this house 15 years ago. Because people who are going to be buying houses or building houses in Georgetown are going to have a lot more money than people who were doing this 10 or 15 years ago. And they're going to have an anticipation of 6 bathrooms, whatever. You're going to see much more. I can just tell you this. You're going to see much more of a push toward maximizing everything you can maximize in the size of that house, because there is a ton of money. If you're buying a house, you know, if you're buying my house now, it just got appraised like at 800,000, which is like shocking to me, completely shocking. So who is a person that's going to come in and buy my house?
Okay, let me tell you who the people who are buying homes right now. Let's go with that. Marvin's project. Who's buying homes? Long-term residents of Georgetown.
Yeah.
Vested people in Georgetown. Craig, an engineer.
Yeah.
Grew up in Georgetown. Another
We're glad they got.
Terry grew up in Georgetown, Top Gun, what the hell, really Top Gun, I love that. Buying the house, so what we are attracting is not out of state people. We are basically, what's happening is we have people who have been invested for many, many years. And
That project does, and that project was going to make Genevieve to do that. See, not everybody.
New York Times article. A month and a half ago. What is exploding all over this country is people being able to work virtually and live in places near ski resorts,
100%.
in the snow, in the miracle environment in which we live. That is going to have an impact on us. And you're gonna have people with all kinds of connections to the governor and blah, 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 pushing on our system. And saying, I've got the money. So I'm gonna build this.
I just want to give a quick example that I can, just as, again, looking at the FAR stuff, just to kind of bring this back and I'll try to. So an example in my head, just thinking about it, okay, I'm an older couple lives, then a client comes to me and, or say client comes to me, they're an older couple. They just want to live on one floor. I want a one-story house. I've got my 5,000 square foot lot. Okay, you can only build 1,700 square feet on your 1,750.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, that's your house and you're allowed a little more for a garage. With the 2,000 square foot, lot coverage, that will allow them an undersized single car garage if they decide they want their garage too.
The garage is separate off the FAR.
I know, but we're talking lot coverage, right? So lot coverage. So you got a house of 1,700 square feet, you got a 250 square foot garage, which is an undersized single car garage. That couple may want family to come over, so I'll add to that scenario. Does include a covered porch, which is an encouragement by the design guidelines, right? We want to articulate the elevations of these houses. They either have to say, well, I can't make my garage day tomorrow or I'll be able to park my car in it. I guess now my lot coverage, I have to give up square footage in my house in order to have a covered porch. And these are the type of things that that's conflicting because.
That has nothing to do with their FAR.
Yes, it does, because lot coverage still applies. So my covered porch is part of my lot coverage, my garage is part of my lot coverage. And that total.
It has nothing to do with your FAR.
No, but it does in that now my 1,700 square foot house. It can't, right, I can't put a covered porch on that because it's gonna blow me out of my 40%.
That's
Okay,
that has
then
nothing
build
to do with your FAR.
of 11th Street. Then build north of 11th.
Okay, but that's, okay, but the point, and similar to that, that's one option for an owner, maybe. But then, say someone comes along, same thing, come and tell, oh, I'm gonna buy this house, and I think, oh man, I could really use, space for grandkids, I'd like to add a second story, add a master, so my kids can come take care of me when I'm old and ancient. So. And in that scenario, you're restricting square footage, whereas, again, back to, you're meeting all these other, your height and your lot coverage. But it's just, there's gonna be situations, and that's my point, I guess, like there's a situation where, that one's good, that's the done deal, and
Well, and one thing I'll say,
We should be, to allow pop-ups on historic homes.
well, one thing I'll say after your comments is this, what we have to remember here, this is supposed to be, the argument is supposed to be what's best for historic Georgetown, not what is best for an individual person. I like a better argument of really what, on one note, if somebody does come to you, hey, I want to do this here, but also too, remember this. If I go to you and I'm like, hey, I just want a 2-bedroom house for myself. If I can't afford it, I don't want the town to go, okay, well, let's make a way for that to afford it. I think my point being is this isn't for all the town. This would never fly in a million years. Not saying the FAR is the right way for this, but I mean, you guys are here because you care about the town, you care about historic. So the better argument is what fits historic and does it fit that? And I 100% respect where you're coming from, but I think like with everybody here, they don't really care as far as somebody coming here, if they get what they want, as long as it still fits historic.
Because we're here.
But you guys,
what does it mean to be a steward? We're not trying to sell homes. You guys are, but we're not trying to sell homes. We're trying to be
Well-
stewards of the landmark district. And we're trying to say that we don't want the place overwhelmed. And we're also looking at a lot of other towns, resort towns, who actually look at us and say, how do you do it? Because you're not overwhelmed. And they have had their historic structures and their historic nature overwhelmed. And we are trying our best to be good stewards of that. And no, our focus is not what somebody desires for a house. It isn't. That has to be your focus, Tom, because that's what you do. But our focus has to be the thing we are charged to do, which is protect the historic integrity and be good stewards of a landmark district. That's the charge to the Planning Commission. That's the charge to the DRC. And that's what we're attempting to do. And this is one tool that we would, laws are never, only the first 10 were ever set in stone, so don't worry about it.
Cindy, please tell me how.
I mean, I have listened, and coming into Georgetown has been very eye-opening for me, because one is it's been hard to afford Georgetown.
Right.
And I would long for Marvin to build me a house on Main Street. I remember driving past that multiple times, long. Marvin just sell this to me, and he told me he already sold it. So I mean, it's like you're turning the lines. It is. I would have chosen that
Lots of money.
100 out of 100 times to live where Marvin's building. But I'm listening to what we're doing. I think we're all passionate. We're all excited about doing things. You've done a lot of work to go from 0.3 to 0.35. And even in our conversations, you're even open to going higher on smaller lots from conversations.
Yeah.
And so I guess what I really want to hear from you is, what is a suggestion? What is it that you would like to see in order to give a number, give me something in order, if you don't like the tool, what is the tool that you're saying in order to look at, in order to accomplish the same thing that we're talking about? Or like, how do we become respectively restrictive to hold the character that we're talking about? So I'd love to hear what your suggestions.
I personally don't see how FAR is going to change anything. Period. The FAR would not change. As far as bulk is concerned, you can still go up high. You can have a.
Not too high,
What?
not too high.
Yeah, not too high. You guys, but you can still
Not too wide.
but not too wide, not too far. We have that. Those are good regulations. Setbacks are good regulations. We like to have front yards, like to have all that. That's 3 controls you have already. Plus you have DRC. You have 4 controls of a person's ability to build or add on to a home. I honestly believe if you adopt this FAR, you're not only going to hurt new development, you're going to hurt a lot of people that want to add on to their home, who want to expand their home like the Cherokee Georgetown, not blow it away. There's a little house on there's a little house on 2nd Street. It really doesn't fit. It's in between 2 Victorians or Victorians on the other side. If you adopt a FAR, and I know the folks that own it, they're renting it right now, and they're long-term family people that own the house, they want to go up on it, which when they go up on it, then DRC is going to come in and fit it much better into the character of that home, into the character of that neighborhood. And if you adopt FAR, they can't do it.
What this doesn't show is contributing historic structures to actually the landmark district or others. And those are the structures. The next map will, because that's what we're currently taking this map and adding all of the other information that we happen to know and have in our books about what are contributing and what are historic structures. And I think if we plug all of that in on top of all of this, you will you will see how this lays out. Because I'm going to sort of disagree that you can take a little old historic structure and you can just blow it up and it's going to be fine. That's a
Whatever regulations don't allow that.
yeah.
I was gonna speak, well, it's a moot point because our regulations simply don't allow that. If I can speak to Rick's point for a second, to kind of draw the conversation back. In part because I don't believe that FAR is the right tool to accomplish, and I appreciate what's trying to be accomplished. I would articulate that in order to not have unintended consequences that go beyond the desired consequence of controlling massive scale through a quantitative figure, 0.45 would be the number that I would choose. Because it would create an upper limit that would avoid the 8,000 square foot house that Cindy insists can be built. That I don't think can be built if it actually complies with the design review guidelines, but we can have that debate over copy. So it prevents that, it prevents the mansionizing of historic structures, which again, I think there's other much sharper tools being used to accomplish that as well. And the FAR does not necessarily prevent that. But so 0.45 would be my FAR number if I had to throw one out there.
Last
But I
week
would-
it was
but I-
0.4.
What's that?
Last week it was 0.4.
Well.
And I was told the week before that it was 3.5 when we had 3,
By means,
and not by you necessarily,
Okay.
but by a group
So,
of people.
well, we're going to buy that is too. But I feel like I gotta articulate again, I think there are better tools to do this with.
What are they?
Well, it's bulk plane regulations is what they're generally referred to as. And they're
Sorry.
bulk plane regulations is what they're generally referred to as, and they're commonly used. Sure. They govern the mass, they quantitatively govern the mass and scale of a structure in relationship to the property boundaries. So in other words, he who shall not be named behind us can't happen in the context of well-constructed bulk plane regulations because the relationship between the property boundary and the structure, right, which also relates it to the adjacent structure, can drive the mass and scale of the house. So if I have a larger lot, right, and I move that structure farther away from my property line, I'm allowed to go a little bit larger by that quantitative bulk plane regulation because I'm having less and less visual impact on that adjacent structure as I move away. And it's not just about visual impact, it's about views, it's about a number of other things. And that's why it's a nice tool because it addresses a multitude of issues. Frankly, I haven't brought it up in any serious context before because I haven't gotten any sense from either group that they were interested in talking about anything but FAR. But it's what I was alluding to when I said, if there was consultation, objective consultation, not the guy you see all the time necessarily in the room, advising the commissions on this issue, that would have been brought up as an alternative. Guaranteed, it's a very commonly used tool. And it's incredibly effective. And it's used in a lot of, what's that?
Commonly used for what, Craig?
Commonly used what?
Commonly used for what? You said they was commonly used
It's
for.
commonly used for controlling massive scale of structure relative to the neighborhood.
Okay, because you started a sentence before that you said, well, it's commonly used for, and.
Oh, sorry, it's commonly used to control a massive scale in the context, in a neighborhood context.
And all the other restrictions apply, they're not changed.
Right, you still,
Height, setbacks, everything.
yeah,
If
but
you
you quantify all this.
either one of them had a laptop, it's beautiful exposition of what that does. It does exactly what I think you're all asking for.
It's incredibly objective, like there can be no subjectivity, it gives quantification to massive scale. in the context, in a contextual way that's contemplative of the nature of the neighborhood and the size and proximity of structures around it. You've seen it.
Yeah, it's essentially, I mean, it's like a three-dimensional setback.
Mhm.
Basically, we look at a site plan, we talk about setbacks. But in the vertical dimension,
Okay,
it's a matter of the setback, okay, if my house is right at my setback line. Typically, you'll have a bulk plane at the setback, you'll be a certain vertical distance, and then once you hit X number of feet. It leans back at, I've seen 45 degree angle, so that, okay, my house. At the property line, I can only build this height. If I scoot back 10 feet, I can build up to here, up until I hit,
But
and
you
then.
can't cross that line.
And you can't cross that line, and then your maximum height still applies, so you.
And it applies all along the property boundary, so that you get that kind of stair stepping that Tom was referring to.
Right.
You avoid that 3-story appearance that Bob's obviously so concerned with.
right. So I get it in some form of theory, but it would work on, what we're after is preserving the sense of history. So our historic structures need to take a precedence in how we set scale for other things. And so what you're saying is, what you're saying is that this would operate in sort of each spot as a nice little, as a spot that's just in relation to what's right next door to it. So if it has a spot where there have been some larger things built next to it, it will operate in conjunction with those
Not if
things.
that large one is not in compliance with the new bulk regulations.
Right.
If the bulk, I mean, it's similar to saying, okay, let's,
Yes, yeah.
I mean, that's the other tool of, as opposed to just saying you can only build X per square feet, it's more like. You can build as many square feet as you can fit into this box.
Which actually it's a better alternative.
As opposed to saying you can only build boxes big.
It is in a way, but in Denver, where I lived in Denver, we had the bulk plane regulations. And I had no argument with them, they were fine. But I think when you start applying it to this district that has so many variations at this point, I think it's awfully hard to find the right bulk
That's
plane.
what I'm trying to get at.
In other words, you could, right now, Betsy's got, well, more or less a flat roof. And I have a very steep one, and Cindy has one that's in between. So trying to find the right height, do you start at 10 feet off the ground or 12 feet off the ground before you start coming in? Or, I know what you're saying, you could bring it narrower and go higher, but how's that going to work? In other words, if we set a bulk plane, we're not going to be able to set it where it's going to apply to most of the things that exist around here.
You're not hearing either one of us say that this is an easy task to establish the correct bulk plane regulation. It would take work. This is a topic that deserves that work because it impacts private property rights in a significant way. And I think when you're crossing that line, which I know we have to do from time to time, we need to do the work, right? We need to do the work to make sure that we're not just taking a sledgehammer to the problem. And I'm not implying that there hasn't been a lot of work done on the FAR. There has at this point. That's right.
You see FAR as a solution.
I very much do, because all the discussion we've had tonight, we haven't really quantified what that looks like, right? We throw out all kinds of different numbers. We talk about 2,500 square foot lots and 3,750 square foot lots and 10,000 square foot lots, and we haven't really quantified precisely what benefit that has and how that is actually accomplishing the goal of, again,
Building a smaller house. It's accomplishing that goal.
not nearly as effectively as bulk plane.
Oh, I would disagree with you. I think bulk plane is appropriate in many places. And it may be that if somebody was a professional planner who wanted to devote their time to this for the next year, that maybe we should study that. But I think this ultimately gives a very flexible way to design, whether it's on a smaller lot or a bigger lot. And it gives flexibility to a designer who's trying to put a house on a lot that maybe is sitting next to Betsy's.
But-
Not exactly, but.
How is it flexible? It gives no consideration to roof line. Right, and we all can appreciate that roof line has a tremendous amount of impact on the massive, massive.
We're not taking away the DRC, we're not taking away the guidelines, so the guidelines still do that.
But you're hammering down the size of the structure to a point where,
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
Okay.
It gives you
show me.
decent sized structures. Well, in a sense, we have tons of structures that would be perfectly fine in here. We have, if we were at a 0.4, we have a majority of our structures that would fit, and people live in them and they have good lives in them. They don't need necessarily to double the size of their house. They may wish to, but and if you have a larger space, then you have a larger structure of that. And as I look at the ones that were recently built, half of that whole thing, fits into it, right the way it is, if you even look at the map.
I wasn't trying to create an argument, I was trying to answer Rick's question. I think I did that effectively, and I'll shut up for the rest of you.
I think it's worth looking at.
That I would like to make is, I attended the Colorado Historic Preservation Conference last week in Boulder. There were 300 people there. And it was really extraordinary. And there's probably 4 sessions that are held every day, and there are 3 days of 4 sessions, and there were sometimes 300 people in a session. And I would say that the general theme that ran through the whole thing, depending on if you were from Telluride, if you were from San Luis Valley, if you were from La Concha, if you were from Park Hill and Denver, it was mass and scale. It was this conversation and all kinds of recommendations for how they were making sure that those McMansions or inappropriate houses or buildings were not going to get built because their communities were being destroyed by this. So we are not alone. And as somebody said, I think last week, yeah, well, you can not do this in Georgia. Or you can say, you're not going to live in Georgetown because you can't stand this kind of regulation. But you're not going anywhere else in Colorado without a lot of restrictions, because people are uniformly throughout this beautiful, snowy, mountainous, wonderful state, just gasping at what's happening to mass and scale in their communities.
And I can tell you, everyone right here
Yes.
is on board with that, mass and scale. We're all on the same page. Period. We are all
Control.
on the same page, and we are all concerned about the preservation of historic Georgetown. You know, I was chairman of the board at one time, and we're all on the same page. We're just not. We're coming from one direction, you're coming from another direction, and I really, honestly, in a real estate sense, believe if you throw this on, a certain bar onto all these homes, I think it's not going to have a positive effect. It's going to have a negative effect, and if that part of it. All the rest is great.
And what is the negative effect?
The negative effect is that Georgetown, the character of Georgetown, starting from the very beginning, a little minor shack, and every generation built upon it. And that's the true character. That's the true character of Georgetown. Every second you go in these homes, and that's what makes these historic homes very unique. You walk into them and you can see the generations.
So just let them let loose? The
No, they're not that loose, they're just the generation that will get sold. And
You know, we have limited amount of space, and a limited number of rooms in that structure. So why are we like saying? Just go for it, go with it.
saying, because of you want to saying, stay in home, you're getting for home. And you may want to, okay, that roof like, my home was like this upstairs, so I opened it up. People do that, they put a dorm room, there's nothing, you're not destroying the character, you're not destroying the character.
But there's
You're
no,
just simply getting
Yes, they are.
needs for those coming in.
But when
They are
you
just
were
trying to-
talking earlier, I'm sorry. I don't know.
Right.
Craig, that's. So when Craig was talking, it sounded like in order to do this other thing. Which I forget what you called it, but
Well,
something,
What was like,
you usually have to have a professional do that, right? It couldn't be the DRC that does that.
Oh, you could,
It would be advisable to have, it would be advisable to have a consultant help you.
with every house
Believe-
that comes in.
No. Write the regulation. Have them help you write the regulation. In an unemotional, completely objective, if you don't consider me accepted.
Switch to every lot we look at.
Yeah, I think you could. I really do.
One size would fit every lot we look at.
Yep.
I wouldn't allow me to build my house.
A technique would fit, and just as you now see several elevations from for new construction or an add-on, you would now see another form that would show you.
It would show you the bulk plan.
And it would either comply with the what your consultant expert would lay out as.
But it would be one bulk plan for every plane.
How it's written is that what describes as, not like this is the bulk plane with put on every lot.
Right.
It's 10 feet back from,
It's
you know,
how you-
45 setback, you can only be X number of height, so it's.
Effectively, picture, I'm looking across a flat lot. And I have a property line here and a property line here. I draw a line up from that property line, X number of feet. I don't want to articulate what that is for
Yeah.
fear that I'll be killed in my sleep. Right? But I draw a line straight up that's X number of feet on that property line
Mhm.
at every point. So if I have a sloped property, right? That moves up and down, right, those side lot lines, okay?
Yeah, most of us is.
And so at a point X feet above the ground, along that property line, it turns at an angle, take an angle. 60, 45, whatever you want it to be, okay, most use 45. And if I, like Tom was saying, if I want to put my house, I want to locate this wall over here, I can only go so high. As I step back and away from the property boundary, my house is allowed to go higher. There's typically a flat cap in there too, that defines a maximum height for the structure. So it's an envelope, right? That's created around the property, and so but the key point is those angles that you draw and the height from which you draw those angles from governs the mass and scale of the house relative to adjacent properties. And that's the point of the home building regulation, which
And relative to the side of the story.
No, let's not, sorry,
okay,
because but I would have a half a dozen other questions on
Sure.
how that
and
operates.
then you go.
I also, I think what we are trying to preserve is that people don't continually add on to their, what we have found is we have had to relist some of our historic properties because of their additions, and we don't want to lose the town that way. And we've delisted them as contributing properties.
But that's a different issue.
It's a different issue in a sense. In another sense, it is not, because because yes, the floor area ratio also helps govern your existing houses.
Well, that's the first time I've heard that point articulated.
But
Either
doesn't
written
it?
minutes or recorded minutes in its entire conversation.
Yeah, but somebody was mentioning something that akin to that, and I was saying, you were, if my house is this, if my house is sitting on a 5,000 square foot lot and it had already got its that it's, let's say we're at 0.4, it's already got its 2,000 square feet.
Yeah.
Then no, I can't stick an addition onto it with more square foot. So that's what I mean.
But additions by their very nature are not inconsistent with historically how Georgia, my house has 6 additions on it before 1875.
Yeah.
So that's historically how structures have been built.
Yeah, have additions, but
Yeah.
we've gotten very, very careful about where additions
Sure,
are
and as well.
placed, and we're not popping roofs anymore, or we're getting to the real, so the fact that you have your historic house, but anyway, that's a different discussion.
I know this is kind of off topic a little bit, but all I keep seeing in this discussion tonight is what happened to the Mint Restaurant in Silverthorne, which you can hardly see anymore, and the Lace House in Central City. I mean, you've not restricted anything and people are building in on top of it, and that's what I'm afraid of.
Yeah, it's happening all over. I mean, this whole discussion, these 300 people this week was just the panic that is ensuing throughout Colorado
It's not,
about what's happening.
that's not new. It's been going on for, that panic about.
Yeah.
Restrictions has been going on since 1970. It's.
But you don't think it's more serious?
Yeah, I think that the message is coming,
I mean,
well, it's we have a younger generation that now is looking at it and saying that that's been very high, which was interesting. It was about 450 people. And on the US side, I got to watch your take on the US Army. Really interesting.
So here's the part that I'm concerned about, because I'm the administrator. I sit with the board of selectmen, and the selectmen have asked that you guys talk and listen to public and try to come back to a place that's accommodating. And that's really what I want to see, is because we've already done 2 moratoriums and not allowing anything to move forward unless it's already in the pipeline, but there's no new. And so I'm concerned right now of the hindered development that wants to happen, that now, there's a building season. And so I'm like, golly, if we push this to another month of moratorium, now we're looking at next year because we're not gonna be able to get stuff done. And so that's what I'm concerned about.
Well, they want us to just kill it.
No, and
That's not true.
that's not true.
No, we're asking us to do something that is going to take a long time.
I'm asking us to be.
We have.
But so this will be the 3rd joint work session from when we put a moratorium on it. And the part that I want to see is to move forward. I understand, like, how can we move forward that would be accommodating to both? That we would say, you feel comfortable with it, you guys feel comfortable with it. And then maybe the long term is to examine that thing that you're just describing, the bulk planning. That's it. I like the concept. I don't really grasp it as well, but I think it is something that I think that we could get our consultant to look on it for a long term so that we put the effort into it. But in the meantime, we're sitting on an ordinance change that could now feel like it's going to be moved forever, and it's now going to hurt everyone.
Well, I think
I
on behalf of the DRC and Sean certainly speak for himself and Betsy, and I know what Bob has said to us. We would advance to council that with the agreement of the planning commission that yes, we could increase the FAR but we would still ask that we put this in place, that we work with it, and we pledge to look at other tools, but let us try to work with this tool also.
And have something to let you go forward.
I mean,
Absolutely, with the tool.
What FAR city?
0.4 for 5,000.
And I would add that one of the problems going forward too quickly is the lack of clear definitions. Tom's done a lot of work that shows the conflict between what the ordinance has, the proposed ordinance, and the Uniform Building Code. And even before that, I didn't make that comparison, but I saw several items that were very vague and could be interpreted various ways. And I would encourage those that give enough time to really define those, and that's why it's unfortunate that we don't currently have a planner approved.
We do have one.
We do have.
Well, then we should be having some discussion with whoever that person is. And
Well, to say to, the new planner, Community Matters Incorporated, they are not looking at this. We have given them some other things because they're looking at it, but we could easily get them to start looking, and I'm certain that they've heard of the bulk plane thing that you're talking about.
But you're talking about putting this off for another year, if you
It's
do
true.
that, and I think that what
That's the
these
part.
commissions that have said. And I think we have looked at it seriously, and I know I've talked to other commissions in other towns, and that won't matter to you, but other historic towns, and yes, this is a tool that is used.
Oh, I know it's the tool that you. I think one of the single family residents here for, I think I calculated it right, 45 years, 47. And I've seen a lot of changes. And I think Cindy, you said it earlier in the meeting, that we've done a pretty good job of preserving the historic character of this district. And to have a little more time to use those same tools have been pretty effective. Maybe there's a mistake behind this, but you know, we won't talk about that. But pretty effective overall. So why not give ourselves a little more time to get this one really right? If we're going to make a significant change in land use ordinance, it's one of the most significant things that a town or municipality can do.
Yeah, when you guys, you said 20 or 25 years ago, I'm sure it was the same battles.
Well, it was almost identical conversation.
Well, it is, but and I know too, like you guys all mentioned that it took a long time to get this into place. That I hugely respect, because it's what we have now. And I respect what, I think everybody's kind of close on that same page. But I have to kind of agree, you can't rush up or you miss something, or it affects something else, which
But there
makes it
will
tough
always
too.
be something, and that's what I learned.
Well, eventually I think it comes along.
Not one, which was to get a historic preservation ordinance in 1970. Yes, I can book and page all of these. To get the 40% lot coverage was just.
That's true, because
To
it used
get
to be
the 25-foot height was a monster,
I would have been-
it.
60%
The fact that
is
we have to
everything
go
except
around the
setbacks.
house to get
Everything.
high
And now it's.
basic tools. And even there are other things that are in this ordinance, even if we drop the far, we hope they would pass the ordinance, because there are other things that are in it. And I would encourage the Board of Selectmen to put the 0.4 bar in for, and if it were me, I would make it 0.35 for above 5,000 feet, but put the 0.4 in. Obviously, ordinances are ordinances, and if we come along and are willing to pursue and say in a year, look, we want to operate a different system, then we come back to them.
I
But
agree with that.
to just continually push the thing down the road, I mean, getting guidelines passed was.
Will you give us 2 days to at least mark up the markup? And maybe make some other questions or suggestions on it?
I mean,
Because I mean,
sure, we got a combination.
Or not make a motion.
There's someone on Zoom that wants to speak.
Gotcha.
Let me just text them.
Okay. So what about this? What about we put this in place?
I'm sorry.
What about we just put this in place, because this is kind of a practical way of the design review committee being able to at least move forward on this. And then you guys come to the meetings and observe this and see how it's going. And then make, because you're experts in this. So. But what, can we just try it?
So
See what it's like, it's gonna be a complete nightmare.
I guess the question would be is since there wasn't a notice for DRC and there's not a quorum for the planning commission, what can you guys do?
We have on the agenda, like, we've just been noticed for a long. Time.
And we do have.
And this been noticed the.
Because I accidentally put that it's a joint meeting with the planning commission, I meant to put design review commission. And that was a typo.
I mean, I could say.
I guess what, do we know, when is this supposed to be voted on? I don't know. But we have to-
It's right now that I'm going anywhere.
On
with
the-
moratorium. So we're pulling out a lot of people.
Yeah, no, I was just. No, I meant for, I mean, for the resolution, that's the board of selectmen that have to make that decision.
I think that the board of selectmen made their last. They extended a moratorium and that would come up on their next meeting, which would be the 28th this month. And that will come up, and so at one way or another, we have to move this in some direction.
Well, and part of that problem is too, is if we make a decision now. And I mean, I kind of agree, because it's not just here, a lot of people have mentioned that it's hastily. If, what I don't want to lose is we make a decision now, we stick it to selectmen. A lot of people show up and they're not happy and they just say no to all of it. Is that possible, Rick? I mean,
Sure.
that's what I don't want to happen. I would rather take a little bit longer, but also I get it with the moratorium. How do we fix that? Because this is something that's become definitely, sorry.
The moratorium doesn't have to be extended. There's, I mean, that's.
I feel like it does.
Well, I'm sure you do, but I mean, it's a practical reality, the moratorium doesn't have to be extended.
No, I understand it doesn't. Well,
so-
and that's the problem. Let's get a rush under the wire.
One example of how the moratorium is affecting, I mean, there's others, but I'll just think of one that comes to mind. It's a person that'd like to do an addition. And it's in the historic district, and the floor area ratio is going to affect that addition. And so she is aware that she cannot submit her application yet until we can get this figured out. So my question to you would be, could we start with would you feel comfortable with a 0.4? Let this come in, we can lift everything, and then we can potentially talk to the board of selectmen and saying, let's try this for a period. And then start seeing how it affects your developments or your designs and things like that. Can it work? Can a 0.4 work? And then come back with another amendment. We can amend it.
If we need.
Well, but here's another thing too. My understanding too is we have variances. That if you come and submit saying, oh, wait a minute, your build is there's nothing on your end, but it's hindering what you're wanting to do. You can apply for a variance to adjust that far.
Yes.
There's on emergency.
According to the guidelines and the variance, it has to be unusual, circumstances very unusual. But the second guideline, that unusual circumstance to the condition cannot, if the majority of homes are, let's say at 3%, 4, or whatever, you can't come in and say, geez, I want to make an addition because I want to add on to my home, or my family needs a larger home. Because it would not fit in because the majority of homes are already in that same situation. If you did a variance to that, everybody could do a variance.
Right, but also, let me ask you, like for this, so too, kind of what
Can you answer the one question real quick though? 0.4, would that be something that would be accommodating?
Certainly more accommodating than 0.3 or 0.35.
Because I mean, like I'm looking at just basic numbers right now. 5,000 square foot lot times
2,000 square feet.
2,000, 7,500 square feet times 0.4, that's 3,000.
That's
And in car, you're not including the covered porch area.
No.
Is that right?
No, not including garages either. So that's
The homes currently that you have built, what is the square feet of the average homes that you built on Main?
They're all over the place, 1,700 square feet to 30, almost 33, if you include everything.
And what's the square feet of the lot?
Oh, they.
They're-
5,000?
Yeah, I don't think we're.
5,600.
Some is
From 6,000 to-
to 6,000,
Versus
Fred's,
10,000.
Fred's about 6,000. But the front three, Tamara, Cindy's and Beth are all within the far for their lot, I believe.
Well, as I say, real quick though, up for your question, Bob, but also too, on a historic house, I mean, the variances, they couldn't do the variance anyway if it didn't fit historic regulations, right?
No,
Cindy?
that's not right. They can get variances for.
Well, I mean, but if they get variance and stuff to go through DRC to be approved for what they're doing, so how does that affect that? Because
Well,
I kind of heard that with the
they can get a
variance,
for
but.
GRC regulation, but they can get a variance.
Well, but that's what I'm getting at though, like Rick said, well, you mentioned that they can get a variance, but even if you get the variance, it's still have to go through DRC.
Guys, also what doesn't count, you have a lot in your buildings where.
You see what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Floor and the top floor doesn't go
Well,
on. Saying is,
I agree.
you couldn't get it.
No, I agree with that, but also true if it didn't fit.
Yeah.
It doesn't count as a GRC.
So Bob has his hands up, he's been waiting for a long time. Can we have Bob speak real quick?
You can go ahead.
Bob, you're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. This has been such a long discussion, it's hard to know where to start. I agree with Kathy Haft. This is a subjective problem. Unfortunately, you're trying to solve it with an objective regulation, and they don't match as nearly as I can tell. And I would urge you not to rush into a regulatory change until we can be satisfied that we have something we can live with. And so I think would be absolutely wrong to adopt a regulatory change while we think about whether it was the right regulation to adopt. That is absolutely the wrong way to go about regulation. It almost is an announcement that we aren't satisfied our regulation is reasonable and therefore legal, but we're going to adopt it anyway and then figure out whether it's reasonable. So I would encourage you not to follow that path. I have listened with interest to this discussion. I watched the PC meeting it was in November, and the Board of Commissioners, the Board of Selectmen meeting in December. Okay, I'm embarrassed, sorry. But I still haven't been able to pin down what the problem is we're trying to solve. What I've been able to figure out is there's something that occurred that somebody didn't like. And the one thing that occurred that somebody didn't like is not the basis for a regulation. And it never is. And so I'm not satisfied that we've even figured out what problem we're trying to solve. And yet we're struggling with what the solution is to this undefined problem. And so I think we have to go backwards and get things figured out better than we have done so far. I would agree, or no, I would disagree that the existence of a variance is allows us to go forward with a regulation that we're not satisfied with. Because variances have objective standards. And I think Mr. Pagano mentioned that. You can't just ask for a variance and because somebody feels like, oh yeah, you can grant it. No, you can't. You have to meet the objective standards of some unusual condition of your property. So I encourage you, if you have to go faster to see whether or not you can develop or even need a regulation, go faster. But don't adopt a regulation that isn't sound while you study whether it's sound. Thank you very much.
So, why don't you think this is sound?
You know,
I don't understand the problem you're trying to solve. And so it's hard for me to figure out whether you're solving it. I have not seen the study, and I admit that. I am skeptical of the study. The only building in this town, I've lived here over 20 years, the only building in this town that I have thought was overmassed and appalling meets your regulation. So I am not satisfied why we're doing this or whether we're accomplishing anything with it. And I believe it's been a rush. And I think you have to step back and approach it in a more diligent way.
Bob, are you willing to serve on the Board of Adjustments?
Absolutely not. That's this.
No,
Oh, well, because somebody who wants to stand for adjustments in the way that you have described it probably would be helpful. I think the problem is very obvious. It does not, it's not going to go away. And yes, I think that the historic character of the historic residential area can be placed in jeopardy very quickly by its infill structures, and that there are plenty of places for those infill structures to be built, and that a FAR is not an unknown. As a matter of fact, it is a known and used tool for helping to control that level of infill. And I think the difficulty that many people have is we walk the streets and we're used to it. So we do not see it until you start really saying, okay, where are the places that this infill could occur? And if you start doing that block after block after block, which the 7 members of this design review commission have spent the last 4 months doing, it becomes very clear the level of the threat.
How many lots are there practically that you've counted up? I think in our little meeting, the number 25 or so was thrown around that included ones that in all practicality will never be built on. So what, do we know what the real number magnitude is?
No, I was at about 27, and it includes, you say in all practicality, there are some that could be included in tracts that are up behind places that I didn't include at all, because that seemed to me in no practicality. These are platted lots that still exist on the town plat and people's plats as existing lots. And yeah, given where they are all located, yes, what we're after is control of infill in order not to overwhelm the nature of the the nature of the residential area, of the buildings of the residential area. And to say that we haven't looked at it, well, we're after it block after block after block after block. And it's just difficult for those of us who, you know, I've walked these streets for a few years myself. And it's even sort of difficult to imagine because we know the place, we love the place, and it has by some hard work and lots of caring remain the place we love. And we just want to ensure that.
You know, the one thing I would add to that is that we, the planning commission, as well as the DRC, have put a fair amount of time, and 4 months, maybe that's not enough time, but I think it's plenty of time into this, and we have worked this through. And people have had, I mean, this has been available to be looked at for a while. I mean, it came up first in December as a real thing, and then it's been postponed and been postponed. And this is the first time we're talking about bulk claim. And that may be a legitimate way, but so is the FAR as an idea. The Board of Selectmen has looked at it, and I think, you know, much as I would rather see 0.35 in there, I would give on the 0.4 buildings on 5,000 square feet of land. And I just don't see any reason to postpone it. And I'm not against studying things more, but I think we have studied it sufficiently. And I think this is a good solution.
And isn't it possible for us to implement this, for you guys to attend some of these meetings, or you might?
We just did here, but this was kind of the first one, I think, when people were actually more aware of it.
But I'm just saying, can we implement it and then can we continue this conversation?
Well, I think
We
that's what,
see that there are issues.
I think that's what Bob was getting at. I mean, it's kind of like it's a unknown of the effects, and that's what that's my more fear of implementing an FAR too, is that, oh, we didn't see that. Kind of like the example before.
I think we're being generous on this, and generous to the people who want to build.
I would,
Especially at the 0.4. So I personally would like to see it less, and I think that the studies that were done have shown that it would be appropriate to do less, but I'm willing to give on that so that we can move forward. If anything, I would see that in the future, we would come down on it, not go up on it. That's my opinion.
Well, I mean, that's the way I look at it too. If we already have a lot of people thinking that we rush this through and we move it through the selectmen still have to pass it, they can pass it or fail it. If they shoot it down, then all the work that we've done for this is lost, correct?
No,
So,
the work for this is not lost, in some senses.
yeah,
Because, you know, it also has focus, it really focuses the DRC. And so if
Yeah, true,
we
true.
have to get just awful and tough and the town gets lawsuits because it doesn't match the area in bulk, so be it.
Looks like Bob wants to say something. Go ahead, Bob.
I think his hand just got let.
Bob, you're on
No,
mute.
I don't understand. Do you want to say?
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. I apologize. I respect Kathy Heath's point that this was addressed a few months ago. And it was listed in the agendas and so forth. And I've had occasion to probably make the same argument. But the town, when it adopted the first reading of Amendment 7 or Ordinance 7 or whatever it was on lodging taxes, made a point of going out to the people affected to ask them what they thought. First I heard of this was last week. Nobody reached out to me. And
Are you-
I think that therefore that undermines the argument that you should have known. Therefore, I think that you should not take a position on this. I don't think you can anyway, because it's a work session. And we should continue this discussion.
I would kind of disagree with you, Bob, because I mean, it's maybe certain people that are affected, but then also too, I wish people would let me know every time that something that will be affected by something. I wish somebody would let me know. Speed limits every time they get changed or whatnot, most importantly. But I mean, yeah, I mean, I think people in a town like this probably should be more aware. It doesn't take much to read what's on your agenda. Where I used to live at, I checked everything that I thought I might be affected by when it came to a town. And make sure I stayed involved with that. That's our personal responsibility if we want to say. But I mean, I agree too, if as people find out what fits the best interest of this town, if people look at it like that, not personally, it does have a huge impact. Yeah, I mean, I don't know much more to say to that. I mean, Rick, what's the best that we should do with this? Because I kind of assumed that this was just a work study, that we wouldn't make a motion for anything.
No, we can't make a motion.
Okay, gotcha. So how do we?
Suggest to the board.
Well, sure.
Make, you know, because it now goes to the Board of Selectmen. It has to go to the Board of Selectmen because they have an ordinance that they passed on first reading, so they have to do something with it. And you know, we will be there and we can, you know, make whatever recommendations we wish to make, and they will make whatever decisions they wish to make.
The one thing I think we could use a motion for is to add in that 0.4 section for the lots over 5,000 square feet.
Well, the planning commission, but this is a work session at this point, so no,
Okay.
I don't think, you know, I think that can be.
So it's brought up at the Board of Selectmen.
That we have met and they asked us to meet and we have met and.
So we take this fight to
certainly-
them with what we think, along with, and that's a
Yes.
public hearing, so
Yes,
it's provided
it's
consent.
And so everybody can say what they wish and the Board of Selectmen will deal with it as they deal with it.
You have your Martian version, Rick?
Oh, yeah, loud and clear. Forward, don't move. Got it.
Oh, man.
Okay, I was gonna ask Bob to clarify the lodging tax. What did he mean by it?
There was broad outreach on that, on the lodging tax.
Yeah,
That was.
broad outreach, not.
unmuted.
Is that what?
Go ahead, Todd.
I didn't know it was still there.
Yeah, he's there.
Yeah.
Right, Bob?
Bob, were you saying that there was broader outreach about the lodging tax? Therefore, the community was more aware of it, where this one was not? Was that the point? You're needed.
I think that was his point, and I can understand that because there, you know, there was money involved.
Well, that was very contentious.
Yeah.
More so than this, because the public's been not aware of it as much, so.
Yeah.
I did have one person just recently suggest that since this is so significant, it's not a minor thing. To everyone in the historic district, that maybe a letter would be sent, like if there's a zoning change or you know, a construction within 500 feet, whatever it is. That there be a big town hall of the historic district property owners, just to have more information out there. I mean, it might be a synopsis page that's sent out about all the work that's been done and the proposals, maybe one or two of them, and have a little broader input than just, we're sort of a small group tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I respect what you're saying, Marv. The people that have mentioned it to me were already right off, this is terrible and we don't want to do this. And then as I tried to explain what we were trying to do, they started to understand why. But it is one of those things that's tough. When we're trying, arguably, we're trying to sell what we think is better for historic Georgetown, right? It's that probably, as I always tell people, well, you should know what's going on, but a lot of people don't because they don't feel like they're affected. This does affect a lot more people than what I even assumed that it did. And just the simple from a 0.3 to a 0.4 makes all the difference in the world. So, you know, I mean, if everybody did find out about it, they all show up at the public hearing. How this moves forward with what we think it's all better, or how it just gets shut down and nothing happens. It's kind of playing, it's kind of teeter-tottering on that. So I mean, yeah, and I don't know, Rick, is that something that normally happens, or, you know, how do we better educate people of the town for what we're trying to do that actually benefits them, and to get involved, like everybody here did. You know, it's all different input. I mean, it's, you know.
It depends on what the topic is and how you get what you.
Gotcha.
So, this one has been kind of gradually moving, and it's different than the lodging tax. I mean, the lodging tax were the vote to the people, and so you had to get that out. So that was a whole different topic of the way that that's being sold. This is, this one's a challenge because, you know, we're all, I mean, it's not like this is the first time we're talking about this. It's been churning for a while on the boards. Although I hear what you're saying, because it's not been churning in the public, and, you know, that, and, you know, it is now. And so it's like, now you're looking at the repercussions, the unintended consequences, the types of bills that would be very restrictive or not restrictive. And so you're looking at these kind of things. So it's a very touchy subject for all of us. And I will relay that back to the board, including with our town attorney, as we're talking through this of what do we do next? Because the goal is to try to move forward with something that we both could agree upon. But it feels to me that we're still in that not sure stage from both sides. So
we're closer, we're just, I mean, we're never gonna be completely on the same page. And this- and
Nobody ever is.
I think that's an effective message for you to convey to the board too, that we're probably as close as we're gonna get on this based on the amount of conversation we've had, and that's okay. It's okay for us to respectfully disagree with one another, it's totally fine. Well,
Is it possible that going forward, we can tweak this if it doesn't seem to be working?
That's kind of tough. Once you put something,
you can always amend an ordinance. It takes first reading, second reading, so it takes time. And even then, it can be tabled from new information. So, and it's good. You always want it to be hard because you don't want something to be easily changed.
Yes, but I would say, you know, when you want to come to an agreement, the night that the Historic Preservation Commission, which is what it was called to begin with, was passed, the Board of Selectmen only had four, you know, we only had 2 boards. So there were 4 selectmen and a police judge, and the vote broke 2 and 2. So it's not as though it hasn't always been controversial to try to be a steward of this place.
That's good.
I just want to find a line and build Betsy's house.
Well, this has been very good discussion. And I appreciate everyone coming and presenting their.
make a motion to adjourn.
Yeah, sure.
Aye. Jen, did you get that?
Yeah, well, you made it.
That'd be something for all. I just adjourned. Oh, I was like, yeah.